Hey, good morning, Making Moves crew. A little bit light this morning. Vitali is stuck at a bank, opening some business accounts, and sounds like it's taking a little bit longer than he had planned. So we're gonna kick things off here and see if the other Tim shows up a little bit later. Hey, so this morning I got a guest here with us. Daryl Mansa goes by Doc. Has been doing real estate for I guess about 6 years now, right,
60.
Doc?
Yeah.
Yeah, and started as a residential real estate broker. Sounds like he found some reading material, uh, learned a little bit about some real estate, and was immediately sold. And I'll actually just turn it over to him for a second here and let him tell you a little bit about the first few years while he was doing this. And he's a little bit different than some of us that have been on here. He was doing some fix and flips in a space in an area maybe a little more tropical than what most of us are used to. So Doc, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Introduce yourself to the group.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Tim. So yeah, I am Doc Mansa. I'm from New York, so syndicated out of New York. I really started in the residential space, did residential fix and flips, wholesaling, buying holes, wholetailing. Because I'm a realtor, I'm able to access and do a little MLS as well. And then, last year I transitioned into commercial real estate as a broker, and then also this year as a syndicator. And so, that's where I got connected to Tim, because he's doing amazing stuff, and it's great. And he's also a mentor of mine. So it's great to connect and learn as much as possible and grow in this space. And so, it's a little bit about, I don't know where you want to go on it, but I just wanted to give you a quick blurb.
No, we'll just chat for a second because I think you're in an interesting spot right now where like some of the folks that are listening and watching, they they're probably there as well. Because so many of us, like one of the familiar stories, and it's my story too. One of the familiar stories you hear is, oh, I started in residential, I was doing fix and flips, I was doing single family stuff like that, and I wanted to transition into multifamily, which you and I very similar. We share the same background with that, and a lot of folks on here do as well. So tell us a little bit, like, where were you doing fix and flips? Because mine were close by here to in the North Carolina and the Charlotte area. Where were you doing them?
So I started in 2016, and I started I was in the corporate world. I really wanted to get in real estate. I did my real estate licensing exam a couple years before, but I never assigned my license with a brokerage, and so I never really got involved in it as much. And then once hey Tim,
Hey, what's up?
you get out of the bank.
Yeah,
Good,
sorry,
man.
it got a little held up at the bank. Never trust a banker, I guess, right? Oh, it only
Yeah,
takes 15 minutes. Literally an hour later, I'm like, dude, I gotta go.
yeah. We think we've all been there. Like, you get
Yeah.
stuck for a little bit.
It's like I'm just opening an account. How many forms do I have to sign?
Yeah.
Well, it was necessary because it was a line of credit. I was like, I need access to this money now.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
take a blood sample, fingerprints, and maybe an eye scan as well. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah. Know your customer, folks. Know your customer.
Yeah.
No.
So
So anyway, so
as I was saying before Tim jumped in,
there you go.
but yeah, I really, I started in 2016. I was doing corporate. I came from the retail side of things, and I was listening to the radio, hear those, seminars of fix and flips. And so I went to a seminar, got sold a dream, left my corporate lifestyle, and really got into it right away. And then, a little things changed. We had, myself, my new fiance at that time, we had a plan for me to dive fully into real estate while she focused on her school. And she had a really great opportunity to study abroad. And so when that came up, we're like, all right, let's shift gears. And so I moved, abroad with her, and we were in St. Kitts in the Caribbean, beautiful. And so,
That must have been real awful. Oh,
yeah, terrible weather all year round, right?
yeah.
So So, from New York, moving from New York, loved it. I grew up in the Caribbean myself. I grew up in Jamaica. That's where my family's from. That's where I'm from. So like going back to a tropical setting was great. But I just started my real estate career. Like I just started getting, rolling, fixing flips. It took me a year to get my first deal. And so that felt like I'm getting momentum. And then we did that. But it was amazing because I was able to do fix and flips remotely. Being in St. Kitts, doing fix and flips in New York, doing a couple things in St. Kitts, but nothing really major. Is more keeping my hands out of that and focusing on where the big money was, which is New York, and traveling back and forth, doing all that stuff. But really got to learn that I needed a team to really help get me to the next step. Yeah. And so that's where that was, and that's my entrance into real estate, as it will.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that's kind of where you are right now, right? With multifamily is, so guys, for those that don't know Doc, he's a go-getter. The one thing I will say about him is he is 100% a go-getter, always digging for deals, always finding things that have potential behind them. And that's always a great piece of it. But he mentioned the second piece there, which is a team. So why don't you talk a little bit about like where you are right now, like transitioning in the multifamily space, and kind of like what's your next steps? Like what do you think you need to do next?
Yeah. So once I fully got back from the Caribbean and I'm back here in the States, I started student rentals, right? I got into student rentals because my wife was still in the school setting, and it just felt like the right thing to do. And I got very niche, did healthcare because my wife is in the healthcare space. And so it was just like, it just made common sense. And now once I'm still a realtor. So I transitioned into commercial real estate and did very niche as well, did commercial real estate only for healthcare professionals. And so with that being said, I started transition looking, and like I really wanted to find someone to connect to learn from. And so I joined a mastermind, connected with Tim and a couple people in the mastermind, and learned, how to get in. And then, I'm there. But one of the main things that to do anything is partnerships. You really need to learn that you can't do anything on your own. You need a solid team, because I'm great at hustling. Like that's what I've done since, day one. I've always been good at hustling and finding the deals and connecting. But at the same time, I'm probably the most introverted social person you'll meet. Like I'm in a crowd, I'm great, but otherwise you'll be finding me like video games, anime, all the stuff that a nerd and a geek does, right? That's what I would be fully into. And so like that's one of the things where in this space you really need to connect with like-minded folks, and then folks that can actually help you step your game up to the next level.
Yeah. And go ahead, Tim.
It's amazing. I love the hustle, right? Because it's so necessary, right? What gets you through from starting to getting to where you want to go is the grit, right? The grit, the hustle gets you through. But the hustle's not scalable. You can't scale hustle, right? You only have so much time.
You wish you could.
Yeah.
Right. You wish you could, because it'd be so much easier if I could just do it all myself. That's why it's so important to join those masterminds and go to these different events and talk with people and build relationships, because you're like, well, I love hustling. Okay, well, let's put hustling into different boxes. And where do you really enjoy hustling, right? Do you really enjoy the hustle of doing QuickBooks for all your assets? No. So you partner with somebody that does, right? You love, like, it seems like you love finding the deal. That's why I said, we were just talking about it yesterday, right? You find somebody that also has that same level of hustle, but loves to hustle at different parts of it. And then together you guys can scale and grow and only do what you want to do.
Yeah. And that's, I was actually going to say, that's like what you can scale hustle. You just can't do it yourself. Right. Like, and one of the places that you do see it, Tim, and Doc, I'd be curious to hear your feedback, because this is a panel of three hustlers, right? Like Doc, Tim, myself. I will fully admit, I will work my ass off, for the things that I quite frankly am interested in. But the thing that can be kind of frustrating is, making sure you find that person that hustles in their area of specialty as hard or close to as hard as you hustle in yours, because that can be frustrating sometimes. Like have you run across that, yourself, or Tim, you in your background, is that something you've come across?
Yeah, for me, it's one of those things where like it's hard, especially like I think all of us can attest when you're starting out, right? One of the big pieces of your team is a contractor. You need a really good contractor, and in the single family space, you find a lot of you find a lot of contractors, and same in the multifamily space, but they're not, like they're good, they're not great, right? And you really need that great person who's gonna like just knock it out of the park for you, and I think that's where I learned you really need a solid person for that part of the team. And you need a person that has the hustle. At least, when you're not there, this and this and this, they can see those things that need to actually be addressed.
And that's probably something you learn. That's one thing I like about folks that come out of the fix and flip space, is that if you're successful there, you understand that, right? Like you understand that piece, because fix and flips is all about, you got to turn them. You got to turn them. If they're sitting waiting for something to be done, that's your money that's burning, right? You're burning that money, not somebody else. You're paying that hard money, you're paying that loan, whatever. And every day that contractor doesn't show up, or somebody doesn't show up to do something, that's just money burned. And that's just one of the things like fix and flips just teach you real fast, right? So I love the fact, and that's kind of where I think some of your hustle comes from, or maybe that's where it was, because one of the things Doc mentioned was, he's hustling, digging for deals, stuff like that. He's extremely good at that. I can tell you that from experience, from working with him on some stuff. Can we talk a little bit about like what you're seeing, like your next steps are, like what do you need to address in terms of like move forward in your team?
Yeah, I think like realizing where I'm good at, I realize also the experience is not there yet, right? Like I'm in the multifamily space. I've been in real estate for, over 6 years now, right? But the multifamily space is new to me. I moved into commercial investing last year as a realtor. And so learning that took its time as a realtor. And then now being an investor in this side of things took its time. And I think learning when you're finding the team, and you learn that you really need a solid, KP sponsor, someone who's there to help you with that. All right, how do you do certain things that you're not really sure about? And especially when you're in an area that a lot of folks have transitioned out of, because I'm in New York, where a lot of persons, they ran to like Florida, and they're in, North Carolina, they're right where you are, right? And they're in those areas because they've made the money here. It's been great here, and I've had some really great connections where, persons I started with, they moved to Georgia, where my mom is at, and they're there doing big things and skill. And you realize the team here, you got to find somebody that's really in that same space as you, that understands how to do the next steps that you don't really know, when you're starting out.
Yeah. So guys, like Daryl and I he found something that was a potential deal in upstate New York. That's considered upstate, right? Like, guys, this is how little if it's not New York City, this is how little I know about New York. And guys, when Daryl came to me, first of all, I was completely off. Like, he came to me talking about the underwriting, and where I'm going with this is why it's so critical to have the right sponsor and understand your markets. He came to me, showed me something, and I was like, nah, no. And then he went to somebody else who was like, no, that knew the market better, and was like, no, there's something, you need to dive further into this thing. And, when he did, it came down to, hey, you need a sponsor. Cause I was, honest up front, right? It's like, hey, I don't know anything about that market. At all. Like I kept referring to the university there as a different university, and Doc kept saying, no, wrong one. This is what's in town. And so, finding that person, I guess that would have been so helpful from a sponsor and KP perspective that knew the market. That became the critical cog in the wheel, right? Like you had the deal, you had this. you had, you were willing to hustle and be the boots on the ground. You could set up the property management team and all that, but finding that sponsor, that KP for that specific market that would have been a good fit to your team, that became the missing link, right? The challenging part.
Yeah.
And that's so guys, like, that's, when we talk about like digging that well before you need it, right? And we always think, and I'm guilty of this, when I think of that, I think of like money, right? Investors. But it really comes down to, it's not just investors, it's the team, it's all the pieces on the team that you need, right? Like, dig that well, have that network in place for that whole team, so that when you find that deal, that you're ready to move on it. Yeah, that's been a critical piece. And this was a good exercise for me, like it made me realize, one, that I know more people in that area than I thought I did. But two, just making sure that, hey, if you're going to break into a market, make sure you know people in that market, lots of them, so that you have options and you can ping ideas off of them and stuff. And I think it was a learning process for me, because most of what I do is in the Carolinas. I know a ton of people in the Carolinas. So, that's, what's your thought on that? Like, what do you think you're going to do next steps on kind of digging that sponsor or team well, if you will?
Yeah, now I think the one of the biggest things that, and it's also true when I started in single family as well, as like the only way you could really connect, 2016 back then, was always going to meetups, right? There was no Zoom, there was none of this that we're doing. Like, it wasn't as prevalent, right? It's the thing, everyone's doing it. And so connecting, networking, putting yourself out there, and making sure that you're finding people who like, know, and trust, somebody you want to work with, because at the end of the day, like, I know where my strengths are, and I know where I really need those kind of pieces to work with, and I think my business approach to multifamily investment is a little bit different from most persons, even yourself. Like, I do student rentals, but I'm very niche. It's only healthcare. I only focus on spots that have healthcare, schools, hospitals. My wife is a veterinarian, so I focus on veterinary spaces, and I have a little bit more information, right? You focus on what where your edges are. Like, I have a little bit more edge on the competition because I have information of where things are happening. And so with that, I'm focusing on those type of investment opportunities. And when you look at those and you compare those to other people's business model, especially most persons who are doing it now, I know, Tim, like, you can chime in and let me know, Vital, is when you're looking at places and student rentals, right? I'm going to go there now, is that you're looking at MSA, you're looking at this large growth, right? It's happening in Carolinas, it's happening in Georgia and Florida. You're looking at a lot of people, moving to this area and growing the area. And when when I'm focusing my business model, I'm focusing on, healthcare spaces. There's certain spots where there's really great schools, really great hospitals, but there's not a large influx of people moving in. That school is the large holder of that, rental market. And so it's a little bit different with your business plan compared to what most people normally do.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I don't disagree with that. You and I look at, and there's no wrong way at this, because I do student rentals as well. You and I just look at student rentals for different things, right? You're looking for, when you say medical, you're looking for student rentals around universities that kind of have a high medical student population, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't get, you're right, that's niche, and I don't get as much in the niche as that goes. I tend to look for universities that have a different kind of a different setup, and neither one's wrong. Like, I completely appreciate where you're going with it, because you understand it, right? Like, that's where your wife came out of. That's what you were around. You saw what your wife went through, and what her friends, people, colleagues were going through as well. I tend to look for universities that are locked in by some sort of thing, if you will. Like, for instance, everybody knows that, I have some student rentals down in Columbia, South Carolina, with the University of South Carolina. That school is hemmed in by the city. There's nowhere for the school to expand other than up, and it's very difficult to expand up there for student housing because of the neighborhoods that are directly around the school. So I look for universities that have a similar kind of setup. Another one, if I'll give things away to folks, another one that you might want to look at that's similar like that is the University of Chapel Hill. Pains me to say it, but yeah, they have a similar setup. They're hemmed in, and that city is only going to allow things to grow so much. So, schools like that tend to depend heavily on the private market to provide student housing. Doc, why do you that's why I focus on that. Why do you focus on the medical piece? Like what's kind of the piece that you've seen there that makes you want to go after that? Like, why do you look for medical schools?
Yeah, I think it's one of those, like, even with COVID, right, really showed you who was the most, who was considered essential. My student rental was medical at that point in time, and it's in New York. And while everyone in New York was having, pains with, tenants paying and all these other things, it was just, I actually raised my rates and, got better tenants at that point in time. And so I really focus on something that I know I know what it's like is we were in that position where my wife was renting a lot, and we weren't looking for the cheapest. We were looking for the best that we could find for us and, that space. And we were willing to pay. And, the other thing is we have dogs. We have like two boys. I'm always talking about my dogs. And so like we wanted a space that had that ability to actually have my pets in it. And that's hard when you're doing, room rentals or you're doing apartment rentals. And even most, apartment, like as a landlord, I'm looking at it like, oh, I may not want pets, but I've had really great success with it. Just knowing how to screen tenants and how to actually properly get them there, do all the hard work first, so you don't have to do it in the back end.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the misconceptions with student housing. I mean, believe me, I lived in a dump. I think I paid like under $100 a month for my piece of that dump. When I was in school. It's what happens when you're paying your own way. It certainly exists, right? There are the dumpy places. I've walked more than my share over the last 2 years looking for student housing. But I will tell you that there are also very, very nice places, and there are students who will treat your property nicely. Like this whole idea that students trash properties, that's a broad stroke. That's just not true across the entire student population, folks. That's just not the case. In fact, I've walked some non-student properties, and Vitaly can attest to this. I've walked some non-student properties that are way worse than anything I've seen in student housing. And like Daryl's talking about, is you give them a nice place to live, chances are they're going to treat it pretty nicely. And then two, the parents and the students that are looking for that level of, room or place to rent, there's probably an expectation there from the parents that the kids are going to be a little more respectful of the property. And so far for me, I've seen that hold true. What do you see with yours? Is that held, or are you walking in, when a lease turns over to a trashed unit? What's your
experience? No, they're pretty nice. Like I've done most of the work when I set it up, and since then I rarely ever go there. Like when we're doing turnovers, it's really like they take care of it really nicely. I go in, I have housekeeping go in to clean, and they're like, there's nothing really here to do, but we'll make it look like we were doing something. And so it's been really good. And then when you have, like you're doing undergraduates and they have their parents co-signing it, they're really holding them. You don't have to be the parent or chasing them down. The parents already done most of that, and they're pretty good for most part once you've screened the tenants and you've done all that stuff on the front end.
Yeah. And folks, the price that you charge on student housing these days is absurd. Absolutely absurd. I was looking at something yesterday in Charleston, student housing in Charleston, and I know that's a great market and everything. This property was doing $5,200 a month for a 4-bedroom. $5,200 was the rent for a month on student housing, and that's, you think about that per bed pricing there. That's pretty strong. I'm feeling pretty good when I'm getting 800 and 900 per bed, and they're far exceeding that in that market. So but again, another one of those, that type of school hemmed in by a city, relying on private housing to house the students. There's demand there, and it's probably not going to be in the form of some 10-story mega student complex that some big institutional developer is going to come in and build. So there's something there. What's up, Tim? You look like you're ready to like.
I'm just I don't know a whole lot about student rentals. I don't look at them. I don't underwrite them. And I'm just kind of soaking it in right now and kind of listening between, like, because I know Tim Vest's theory and how he looks at stuff, and a lot of the properties that he owns. But then Doc, you have a completely different theory, and for me, it's kind of interesting, right? I understand the allure of doing student rentals with the high price per bed numbers and all that kind of things. But actually, what truthfully popped in my head was, like, in some places like Charleston, the only option in order to make it a good deal is to make it student housing.
Yeah.
The prices are so high, you can't cash flow otherwise on a regular 12-month lease.
Right.
Now, it's, hey, like, everyone's got their niche, right? Actually, Tim, you kind of are spread out all over the place with student rentals and long-term rentals. But, Doc, you're dialed in with exactly what you want. I'm more of a traditional rental apartment kind of guy. And that's okay, right? I mean, there's enough property out there for everybody. And I think it's a beautiful thing, just kind of learning about different people's perspectives and experiences and mindset. And ultimately, that's all we're trying to do here is bring value to the community by exposing more options.
Yeah.
The more options that you have, the more business plans you can create with any piece of property. It's another tool in the toolbox, right? I mean, you can look at something a million different ways, but if you're only looking at it like through one little spectacle, then not everything's going to work. But if you're like, hey, well, actually, I listened to Tim and Doc and talk about student rentals, and Tim had mentioned, you could get 900 a bed for blah blah blah. What if I do that? Does that make it a good deal? And that's kind of kind of the beauty of it. It's almost like there's too many options. When there's too many options, it's a blessing and a curse. There's too many options for financing. There's too many options for structuring deals. There's too many options for ways to increase the gross revenue and reduce the expenses and all that kind of stuff. But it's also a beautiful thing because it gives you so many options in order to figure out what are you really good at.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. And just like markets, what I would say is,
absolutely
pick an option, get good at it, then add another option, and that's because you are right. I'm spread a little bit all over the place, but I really, really look at things through three lenses is kind of how I look at them. And I apply those three lenses to almost every property. And a lot of times with the student stuff, that student lens goes away real fast. Like, I'm like, student, no. Okay, now what? So then I start to look at the other two, like what Doc you're talking about, around like medical universities and stuff. Like, you're starting to make me rethink Duke University here in the Carolinas. Like, not from the standpoint of like I wouldn't do anything around Duke, but like make me rethink of like how I look at properties near Duke, especially because of the whole medical component. Like, when I start to look at medical things, I instantly start thinking traveling nurses.
Yep.
But you look at it in a different way. Like, you think medical students, right?
They tend to take care of your units. They're really good tenants, and you really don't have any issue with
it. They're at the hospital honestly, most of the time anyways, doing their rounds, they're in what's the term?
Never home.
Yeah, they're never home.
Yeah.
Residency. They're doing their residency. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. Oddly enough, those are the tenants you like, the ones who are never actually there. Appliances tend to last longer for tenants that are never in the unit.
Like we had like I recently went to the unit to check it out, and we had stuff, and I had someone through, and they're like, "Hey, did you guys just remodel space?" And it's like, "No, it's been a couple of years, but it looks just like there's nothing." That you have to really do and upkeep, and it's just because you have really good tenants, and
It's almost like Airbnbs, because Airbnbs are cleaned so frequently that they're always in really good condition. Because as soon as something goes wrong, usually you can point the finger at somebody and say, "Hey, well, actually, you stayed here and ruined it. It worked before you left," and replace things pretty quickly. But that's why they tend to stay in really good condition. They got a cleaner in there like
Yeah.
once or twice a week.
Yeah.
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 No, go
Sorry.
ahead. No, go, Doc.
Now, I was saying, I was second point, and I hopefully don't go too much in the weeds here, but like I was like, I like the component of the fact that like you have a student in for about 44 to 8 years, right? Like depending on their medical students, residency is super long. They're going to be in your unit for like 8 years or 6 years, or depending on what they're doing, right? And so it's no longer a 2 year, 4 year component. It goes to 6 to 8. And I'd rather have those tenants in there for that period of time. Then they transition out and they're giving it to their colleagues who comes in knowing what it's about, and they're already setting the standard for what it should be. And the rates are going up anyway, right? The prices go up. You have the annual escalations and all that. But in those 4 years, the market might change. There might be something that, rates should go up a little bit more. Like we saw that with COVID, the rates should go up it went up drastically. And I was able to still increase my rates a little bit more, even through that period, because you had that tenant that moved out, and then there's coming in, and it's a new wave.
Yeah. I think you mentioned something too that a lot of people overlook with student housing, by the way, is there's two pieces that are, to me, are quite critical. And we've seen was one, reputation, the reputation of the unit itself, of the building itself. That's key. If you keep it in a good shape and it gets a reputation for being in good shape, and you as a good landlord, that's highly, highly beneficial on campus, because word gets around campus, right? Like conversely, if you're a bad landlord and you're just letting the property go to hell, that'll make its way around campus too. But then the second piece is what you said, like the tenants that are in there, that when their lease is coming due and they're moving out, they tell people, and they're like, "Hey, I'm moving out," and their friends will go, "Oh, can I take over? Can I take the spot?" And I mean, we have some that like our property manager doesn't even have to do anything, because as soon as that lease is coming up, their friends are coming in and going, "We want to move in," and it just makes for a really nice, as long as you keep your reputation good and you keep the units in good shape, it makes for a really nice flow with tenants. You really just don't have any vacancy, a lot of these markets.
Vacancy kills profits.
Yeah. And these stay going. And that's another thing too, folks. Like, I for whatever reason, folks are always like, "But aren't student rentals on like 10-month leases?" Like, no, ours run 12 months. They're back to back. Other than we usually like to ask for about a week in between tenants to just clean and turn the unit, which, depends on the tenant, obviously, but that's about it. Other than that, they're 12-month leases. Do you run those as well? You run them year long?
Yeah. I have some that are flexible. Like I have really good tenants where some of the tenants are mostly graduate level, so they're working and they're doing their stuff, and I was like, all right, we can do whatever you suggest, whatever makes sense. So we'll be flexible and do month to month or a couple months, and they're pretty good. If they're moving out, it's like 3 months notice, right? Yeah. I had a tenant that just leave because she got a job, and she's moving to Texas, and she got a job there working. I think she's in the hospital, and so she knew this beforehand, so she was able to set that up. She got one of her colleagues to take it over, and so I did nothing. Like I literally, it's like, okay, great, and that was the smoothest transition ever for something that was a big thing for most people, I guess, if you're doing student rentals.
Yeah, got it. Well, Doc, we're coming up on the end of the time here. I want to leave a second for you to tell folks how to get in touch with you, but real quick, guys, like if you're doing stuff in New York or whatever, or you want to do stuff in New York, take a second, reach out to Doc. Like when we said this guy hustles, he hustles. He will find you properties. He will find them. So, if you want to do business up in that area, make sure you get in touch with them. And with that, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So like if you're trying to connect, investment and, want to connect for syndications, just reach out to me on Facebook. It's Daryl Mansa at Facebook, right? So just let's put it together. And if you want to email me, it's darylmansa@gmail. So really simple. And for as a realtor, commercial realtor, if you just search my name, Daryl Mansa, Buffalo, I'll pop up. The only one, that pops up. So it's really, really easy to get in touch with me. I'm an easy guy to find.
Gotcha. Well, Tim, any parting words, man?
No, man. I apologize for being a couple of minutes late, but I really enjoyed learning your mindset and your perspective of what you're doing in the multifamily world. And hopefully hopefully you get to move back to the Caribbean sooner than later, if that's whenever you
go. I go as often as I can.
Oh, do you? Yeah. So, yeah, man, really inspiring, and I love what you're doing, and looking forward to talking with you again in the future.
All right, guys.
I appreciate it.
All right, Tim. All right, Doc. Take care, guys.
Take care.
See ya.